Well, hello and welcome back to Jones Financial Talk. This is Nick Jones from Jones and Associates Premier Financial Solutions. Listeners, thank you for tuning into our radio show today. Tony and I really enjoy that. If you want more information about what you hear on this show or have questions for us, you can go to jonesfinancialtalk.com. You can click on the radio page ad and you can download this program on Spotify, other great devices as well. You can listen to the website right there or listen to the radio show right there on the website also, and click on any buttons to suggest topics for our radio shows like the one that we have today. And so what we're going to discuss today is year-end planning. In the fourth quarter, lots of things can happen that you want to be talking to your advisor about. Fall is just an ideal time to sit down and examine your financial health and update any of your financial plans. And so we're going to bring in, I'm going to bring in Tony Shore so we can talk about a list of hot topics that you probably should be discussing with your advisor if you're not already. How you doing, Mr. Shore?
Well, I'm doing great. And this is a timely topic you've got for us today. We're going to go over some year-end financial tips, a financial checklist before year-end. I've been great, enjoying the fall weather. How about you? Have you been keeping busy?
Definitely keeping busy. This is a great quarter to do reviews with clients, as I mentioned, because there's just so many things that should be addressed before the end of the year, like what we're going to discuss on the show today.
Yeah, it's going to be good. And I'm really excited about it because I know that this is a topic you go over with all of your clients, and all of us need to review where we're at. And at the end of the year, before the end of the year, you need to look at where you're at for tax purpose reasons and a number of other reasons as well that we're going to get into in the show today. But yeah, I've been crazy busy trying to take care of my parents, who are getting older. Spent the last 3 days doing that, but now I'm back at it and got them straightened out. Have to make sure that they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's and paying their bills. It's so funny how roles reverse as you get older, isn't it?
It sure is. You are correct.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I tell you what, Nick, this is going to be good. Where do you want to start?
Well, you just brought up a great point. You know that in the fourth quarter, many things happen that we need to help other people with. So, for instance, Medicare, right? This is the time of year for open enrollment for PDP planning. And so that's happening right now. So you should definitely be talking with your trusted resources to help you with that. But Tony, you brought up a good point. Taxes. Usually property taxes are due this time of the year. Many of the topics and subjects we're going to talk about today are somewhat related to tax code or IRS reasoning. So we will discuss that. But, where do you get the tax from if you have tax bills that are due right now? And so that's a great point. A lot of people, Tony, use their required minimum distributions to fund some of these things. And so that's the first thing on my checklist. The required minimum distribution age, listeners, is the year that you turn 73 today. And if you don't take that required minimum distribution that the IRS asks you to, there can be an extremely steep penalty. In years previously, it was around a 50% penalty, and it was moved down to a 25% penalty with the recent CARES Act that passed this year, which is great. But still, who wants to lose money because you fail to plan for this very important topic?
Yeah, and we've talked about required minimum distributions or RMDs on the show a lot in the past, Nick, and I'm glad you brought that up because you have to make sure you've taken that. For a lot of people, if they're older than 70 and a half, they're taking them. The new age is 73. I know that they've bumped it out a bit, but if you were already taking them, you have to continue taking them. And this is the time. The penalty is steep. I think it's they reduced it, but it's still 25%, isn't it?
That's right. And a lot of people ask me like how you calculate the required minimum distribution and how that works. And there is a formula. Maybe I'll just discuss that. Tony, you are correct. It used to be the age of 70 and a half. And then when we first had the first CARES Act that came out with coronavirus issues, we moved it up to the age of 72. Today, it's the age of 73. So the year that you turn 73, you have to pull out your first required minimum distribution. The age of 74 and 75 is to come, Tony. So in the next 10 years, the IRS is going to push those dates out because of longevity in our population. But every single year, the IRS sends us a schedule that outlines what percentage of your IRA accounts, retirement accounts, qualified accounts, you have to draw down based on how old you are. And so somebody that's the age of 73 might have to draw about 4% of their total account value down every single year. And the way that this works, Tony, is at the end of the previous year, so December 31st of 2022 in this situation, there is a value for all of your retirement accounts that get sent to the IRS. And so they know already, based on the percentage that they're telling you that you have to take out for the following year, what that amount's going to be. And they do not care which IRA you take it out of specifically. You just have to take the dollar amount that they mentioned. And so then listeners, you might ask me the question, well, how do they know if I took it? You're going to get a 1099 at the end of the year from your custodian that outlines how much you actually took. And as long as you took your required minimum distribution, there's no penalty.
Oh, okay. Well, and that's important. Just yet another reason to work with somebody like yourself, right, Nick? I mean, you need a financial advisor, a financial planner who knows these things, who will make sure you don't miss these. And I know you have them planned out for your clients, and you're on top of that and help your clients review what they need to do before the end of the year. So number one on the list to plan ahead and stay on track, the year-end planning checklist, is RMDs. Make
That's
sure
right.
you've taken your required minimum distributions. What's number two?
So the next thing that kind of coincides with this, not exactly, is reviewing your tax withholdings. Okay. And so if you've had a different event take place this year than a year previously, say you got a divorce or you got married or some specific huge medical expense, you're going to want to review your tax withholding schedules with your financial advisor because you want to make sure that you're withholding enough. That's another really, really big thing. And I would even go as far as say this. When I sit down with clients multiple times a year, one of the main things that people do when they're retired is take money out of their accounts. And when they ask me, Nick, I want to take $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 out of my accounts for some specific reason, I always talk to them about their income. So let's review your income again. Let's think through what your income level is today so that I can try to help you figure out what tax bracket you're going to be in to update those tax withholdings. That's a very, very important thing. Otherwise, you're going to either end up owing lots of money to either the state or the feds, or you're going to get a big refund, which we all like. But why would you want to give it to the feds or the state for too long of a period of time and not keep it in your own pocket?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You want to minimize your tax burden, obviously, and maximize what you do get to keep in your pocket. That's a good thing. And another reason you need to work with a financial professional who's got the big picture in mind alongside tax professionals. And I know in your office there, you work alongside tax professionals to help your clients do just that. Review their tax holdings and make sure they look at everything. If you had a big event like a wedding or divorce, as you mentioned, it's really important to look at where you're at. So that's number two on the list. That's a big one. What's number three?
So the next one is something I've been doing a lot this year with many clients, and it's talking to your advisor about refinancing your portfolio, Tony. And so we have not talked about this very often because basically for the first time in many years, 10 to 15 years, we're in a totally different interest rate environment that gives us the advantages to try to possibly refinance some of your portfolio options. And so we'll discuss that. But what I mean is because interest rates are so much higher, many products that are linked to the markets are dictated based on what interest rates are doing. And so if you're not reviewing these on a regular basis with your advisor, you're going to miss out on the opportunity. If interest rates are as high as they are today, the upside potential in many fixed investments like fixed indexed annuities and multi-year guaranteed annuities and CDs, for instance, are much higher. And so it might be a time for you to consider taking current investments that you own and refinancing them into a higher rate and locking that rate in for an amount of time that you desire, a year, 2 years, 3 years, for instance.
Sure. So review your portfolio, where your money is invested, and take a look at that. Take a big, long look at that because, again, there are tax implications to that. And especially before the end of the year, you want to make sure you're making the right moves and your assets are properly allocated. And I would assume that along with your investments, that another thing on the year-end planning checklist would be to review insurance policies too, right?
Definitely, because many insurance policies are also tied to interest rates somehow with some type of growth initiative or option inside those specific terms. And Tony, I'll mention one thing here also. Nobody can predict where interest rates are going to go, but I think most of what we have heard lately in the fourth quarter of this year, 2023, is that the Federal Reserve is probably close to the end of their tightening cycle. And many economists are predicting that they might actually consider cutting rates middle to end of next year to re-stimulate the
Wow.
economy. And so, why is that important? Well, this is a very short period of time where something like refinancing your portfolio could take place and be the most beneficial time to do that. And so, you're exactly correct. Life insurance is another great thing that you definitely want to review to make sure that you're in that specific situation where you're taking advantage of these higher rates.
Right. And you need to get a second opinion on your policies and where you're at, or get a plan in place to begin with. A lot of people aren't sure what they have and what it's doing for them. And that's something, Nick, that you can review for them, correct?
Definitely. Yep, that's something that we do every single day.
All right. So if our listeners want to do that, how can they get a hold of you?
So the easiest way is just to go right to jonesfinancialtalk.com. You can request to have a meeting with myself, a phone call to review any specific question, financial wise, insurance wise, tax wise, estate planning wise, that you might want to discuss. And that's the easiest way to do it, Tony, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, this has been a great discussion so far, Nick. We've covered a lot. And again, I want to remind our listeners if you have questions about what we're talking about, if you want to make sure your finances are in order before the end of the year, just go to jonesfinancialtalk.com. Now, we're looking at this year end planning checklist. What's next on the list, Nick?
So, a big thing for many people is charitable contributions. And the reason why this is a big topic in the fourth quarter is many people that have to take that required minimum distribution can do so by sending it directly to charities and not having to pay the taxes as much as what they would if they just put the money in their pocket. So, charitable contributions is something that comes up a lot during these conversations, Tony. And then the other thing is Roth conversions. This is a huge thing that I want to spend some time on.
Sure. So you need this. This is the time probably then to consider a Roth conversion. And by Roth conversion, explain what you mean there.
Okay. So a lot of people have traditional IRAs, traditional 401ks, qualified money that when they were working, they got a tax deduction to put this money into their accounts. And depending on your tax situation and what bracket you fall into and what your long-term goals are, it might make sense to convert some of that IRA money every single year into a Roth IRA. So what that means is you take a chunk of money, let's just call it $10,000 to keep these numbers simple. You take the money, you pay the taxes on it today. Okay, so let's just say that somebody's in a standard withholding situation. Standard usually means 12% for the federal government, 8% for the state of Oregon, for instance. So you've got $10,000 and basically combined 20% is going to go to taxes. So that goes to the Fed and the state. You've got $8,000 net that you could roll over into a Roth IRA. Okay. So why would you want to do that conversion rather than just putting the money in your own pocket? The reason for that is because once it's into the Roth IRA, it now grows tax deferred. It grows tax free when you take any distribution from it out. Okay. And on top of that, you're not required to take any money out of a Roth IRA. There's no RMD rule. So it's a legacy planning tool at the very least for many, many folks.
Plus, it's a tax-free option for retirement when you need that money and when you need to minimize your tax burden. And you might as well do it while taxes are lower now because we know taxes will be going up. I mean, the current low tax rates are going to expire in a year
That's right.
and in about a year. And then we know taxes will go up after that. They have to go up because of the federal deficits out of control and spending. So I can only imagine taxes will go up and maybe exponentially over the next few years. So now seems like a great time to do that Roth conversion, because not only is the principal coming out tax-free, all the growth as well comes out tax-free. There's no required minimum distribution on a Roth, is what you're saying. That
Yep.
sounds like a great tool.
Yeah. And remember, we've talked about this on our show many times, but when you have different buckets of money, right? Usually those buckets are qualified money. Every single time you come and ask your advisor for them, you got to pay taxes on them. And then it's maybe joint or individual money, after tax money. Every time that you come and ask your advisor for them, you maybe have to pay capital gains. And then Roth IRA money, every time you come and ask for that money from your advisor, there's no tax implications. If you've got multiple buckets, like we've talked about in the past, you've just got a lot better opportunity to not only not have to pay as much taxes, but really manage your tax liability through those three different sources, right? All the time. And so that's why it's so important to consider doing those Roth conversions, Tony.
So, and let me get this straight now. You said maybe even as a legacy tool to pass on, your part of your estate to pass on to your loved ones. So if you have a Roth IRA, and let's just say you have $100,000 in a Roth. I mean, that's a lot probably for most
Yep.
people in a Roth, but let's say you have that. That would be nice if you built that up over time. And you want to leave that to your son or daughter, right?
Yep.
And you pass. Does your son or daughter have to pay any tax on it?
No. So all of the great
Even
tax
estate
benefits.
taxing? Even estate
So
tax?
an estate tax is different. I'll cover that in just a second, but
Sure.
all of the great tax benefits that you get individually to put money into a Roth IRA are transferred to your heirs.
Ah,
Now,
nice.
there are some specific situations in tax code today where if it's your spouse that inherits any of your retirement accounts, they have the rest of their life to use the money. If it's another real person that's not a spouse, like a child, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, then they do have to spend all this money in 10 years today in IRS tax code, but it won't be taxable to them if it's in a Roth IRA. It would be taxable to them if you didn't do the Roth conversion
Right.
and you left it alone in the IRA, right? And then the third thing here is if you leave the money to somebody that's an entity, not a real person, like a trust, they today have to spend those retirement assets down in 5 years. So, huge implications here if you're not doing correct planning that we definitely want to discuss. And then,
Yeah.
Tony, you asked about estate taxes. So, here, every single state, well, I should say, I think about 12 to 13 states have some specific estate tax. So,
Yeah.
a tax at death. And in the state of Oregon, we are in the lowest threshold in the country. Minnesota is another low one, but in
Yeah.
Oregon, it starts at $1 million. So if your total assets when you pass away are above $1 million, your heirs, your estate is going to pay some type of estate tax to Oregon. Okay. And
Sure.
it starts here at 10%. So you
Wow.
definitely need to talk with your advisor about the opportunity to convert assets every single year, and that's why we do it in the fourth quarter, which I'll mention something in a second, and also how that could impact an estate planning situation. Tony, the reason why I say to really consider a lot of these things in the fourth quarter is for this specific reason. When people are retired, most of the time they're on a fixed income. It's very easy to determine how much their tax liability is going to be.
Yeah.
But what if something happens along the way? They got to put a roof on the house. They got to fix the furnace. They've got to buy a new car, medical expenses. All of those things require what? It requires for them to pull more money out of their account. And so
Yeah.
this could increase their tax liability throughout the year based on things that they had no idea they were maybe going to do. And so why I explain this is in the fourth quarter is the best time of the year to do these specific planning topics and organizing them, because then we've at least known what's happened all year long to then be able to estimate the best tax scenario for you if we do any of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. And I'm glad you explained that. I'm sure our listeners have questions. But the great news is there's a no charge, no obligation consultation that you're offering all our listeners. All they have to do is mention they heard about it on the radio show or podcast, and they can set up that no charge, no obligation consultation with you. They just have to go to jonesfinancialtalk.com. There's a contact form, there's information, there's a link to the main website. They can listen to past shows there as well. Again, that web address is jonesfinancialtalk.com. Okay, so what's next on the list, the year-end planning checklist?
I actually just thought of a couple things based on you talking to listeners and telling them to go to our website. So, two other things that are definitely important: document storage and talking to your advisors about all the important documents, and then also assessing your risk tolerance every year. And we do both of those through our website. Our clients utilize a service that we have organized and set up called the Generational Vault. And inside this system, when you go to our website, you can do this as well, listeners. You can, one, take a risk tolerance questionnaire. And the reason why that's so important is so that you and your advisor make sure that the risk that you're taking in your portfolio is still adequate for what your specific situation is. And that has changed drastically for many people after we had a significant downturn and sell off in the markets last year. And so for many years, nobody really had to do that as much, or they didn't think it was important because the market went straight up for the last decade. Okay. But in a year when the market went down 20%, guess how many prospects walked in the door and said, I didn't talk to my advisor. I didn't know my risk level was that high. Why did I lose so much money? This is the reasoning behind why you have to continuously review that risk tolerance questionnaire. And so that's one big thing I wanted to mention. The other is, and the reason why it's tied to it is because our system is built this way. The other is adequate document storage. And so you should be talking to your advisor and have all of your very important documents duplicated somewhere in a very safe spot. Because if something happens to you and your executor of your estate is your child that lives in Florida and you live in Oregon, how do they have access to any of the documents to be able to help you? Right. And so, what are the documents I'm talking about, Tony? I'm talking about clearly a will or a trust, but really more important than those two when you're still living, healthcare directive and power of attorney financially. So all of those things for most of our clients are stored within our generational vault, which gives them the ability to have access to those wherever they are. And it also gives them the ability to let their executors and their trusted resources have access to those important documents.
Yeah. Well, I think that's huge, Nick, and it's really important that people do this. Everybody has a different risk tolerance. They can take the color of money risk analysis that you have there on your site. They can check out the Generational Vault, and these are tools that you provide at no charge for your clients, for people who you meet with, for our listeners out there. They can access this, but they need to set up that consultation. Go to jonesfinancialtalk.com. Now, another year-end thing that I've heard you mention a lot for, and that is maximizing your retirement contributions. Some people might be in a situation where before the end of the year, they want to take advantage of catch-up provisions in their retirement accounts, like 401ks, IRAs. Am I right on that?
You are right on. Yeah. So the good thing about IRAs mostly is you can still fund those up till you file your taxes in the following year. So in an IRA situation, you can actually fund money, for instance, for 2023 before you file your taxes in 2024. Okay, so that's a nice option in an IRA. But in a 401k or a 403b or basically anything that comes, that any retirement account that's tied to your actual job today that comes out of your paycheck,
From
you
your
do have to
employer,
do
yeah.
it in your employer plan. You do have to do it in the current year, and so that's a very, very important point. This time of year is a great option to consider retirement contributions to see, what happens if you live on $3,000 a month and you've got 20 grand in savings and you don't need the income for the next 2 or 3 months from your paycheck because you can live off the money that's in your savings account. Well, you could take the majority of your paycheck and just load that right into your 403b or 401k to help increase those contributions in your retirement accounts. And so why not do that? One, it'll help you grow your assets. Two, maybe it's a good tax deduction situation for you that you want to consider.
Sure, because that money would go right from your paycheck into that account, your 401k, and that if it's a tax-deferred account, like a traditional 401k or 403b or 457, then that's money that you're not taxed. That won't count as your adjusted gross income. So that's awesome.
That's right. And, maybe I should mention a couple of age milestones here that would
Sure.
maybe trigger some people to consider doing more of this. So at the age of 50, that's where you can make some catch up contributions to these types of accounts and IRAs, because the IRS knows that you're closer to retirement. And once you get to that age, they allow the thresholds of what you can put in to be much higher. The other thing and reason why you would want to fully fund those types of accounts is because at the age of 55, you can actually start taking distributions from your 401k plan, if you've retired without a penalty. So in most situations, right, before the age of 59 and a half, you have a 10% penalty if you early withdraw from your retirement accounts. But there are a couple of specific stipulations here that change based on your age. So today, if you're 55 and you leave the money inside your retirement account at work, you might still have the option to be able to pull money out of there. And then on top of that, if you want to work with somebody like us, you could do what's called a 72T, which basically just gives you the ability to take money out of your IRA before the age of 59 and a half. So if you want to retire early and you've got a good nest egg of money that you saved in a 403b or a 401k, one of these two options might be a great solution for you. A lot of people walk into my office, Tony, especially since COVID hit, and they say, I want to retire earlier. Quality of life means more to me than more money. And I have enough money saved, but they're frustrated because they feel like they maybe don't have access to the money. Well, depending on your age, 50, 55, 59 and a half, you have different access levels and ways to get that money, to utilize it for your goals. So those are three very, very important milestones, age-wise, that we need to discuss and you need to be talking to your advisor about.
Yeah, especially before the end of the year, in case you want to make some of those catch-up contributions or withdrawals, and it does affect your tax situation in many cases. Your tax situation, I just think that's so important. In fact, a lot of what we talked about have tax implications, and that's why you need to look at them before the end of the year. You made that point today. This has been great, talking about a year-end planning checklist. There are even more. I know if somebody wants to go over even more, there are healthcare options people need to look at before the end of the year, before December 7th, with Medicare annual election period, open enrollment. So much out there. Insurance, RMDs, you covered a lot, tax withholdings, investments. So our listeners have questions. Where can they go once again, Nick, to get answers?
I mean, the best and easiest place is for them just to go to our website at jonesfinancialtalk.com. Lots of great information, lots of resources like this checklist on there that you can request. And I would just urge them to go there to ask any questions that they have, please.
All right. Well, thanks, Nick. Great show today. It's been a good one. That does it for today's episode of Jones Financial Talk.